Hey friends, it's Amy Chappell from Amy Designs, and today we're here to talk about binding. In this video, we're going to finish up our binding series by showing you how to attach your binding to the back side of your quilted project. In previous videos, we've gone over how to determine how much binding you need and get it ready, how to attach your binding to the front, how to join your final two ends of binding, and now we're going to finish up with sewing it to the back. To begin, there are two different methods that I like to use to sew down the binding to the back. The first method, which is what I use most common, is to hand stitch the binding down. I love this method because it hides all of your stitches and it gives you a nice clean finish on the back. Plus, I just think it's really relaxing to have a needle and thread, sit down in a comfy chair, maybe watch a movie and do some binding. But if you're in a hurry, taking it to your sewing machine to stitch down that binding is a really fast and easy way to get it done. And with practice, you can get really good at it, and you may even prefer that look. So it's totally an option if that's what you choose. To begin the hand binding, I will take just a piece of thread and a needle. I will tie a knot in one end of my thread, and typically I will use a thread that matches the color of my binding so that the stitches disappear even more, but I want it to stand out a little bit for you in this video, so I am using a contrasting thread. I like to use these Wonder Clips to hold my fabric so I don't have pins to stab me. You can totally use pins to do it too. And now I'm going to confess here that I don't always use the pins to turn it over or the clips to hold it. But I do find that it's a lot easier to take the tension out of your fabric from your binding if you use these clips to hold it over onto the side that you're working on. So if you are new to binding, I really recommend getting these clips. You could use clothespins or something like that just to help you hold the fabric over to the backside so that you're not fighting with the tension on the binding as well. So once you have your fabric folded over how you like, I am going to take my needle and I am going to slide it through the backing and a little bit of my batting, but I'm going to make sure that my knot lands over in this seam allowance here so that when I fold over my binding, I'm hiding my knot. I'm going to fold my binding back down, and now I'm going to create a stitch. So I'm going to put my needle into the folded edge of my binding in the same place that my thread has come out. And then I'm going to take a stitch. You can see where my needle's coming out. And I'll pull my thread. And now my next stitch is going to go into my backing and a little bit of my batting. And it's going to go into the backing right in the same spot that it came out of the binding so that those stitches are right on top of each other. And then I'm going to take a stitch. Now I'm going to show you how to combine those two stitches so that you get two stitches in one movement of your needle, and it makes hand binding a lot faster. You're going to repeat the same. You're going to put your needle in through the fold of your binding just right above where the thread is coming out. So you see I have my thread coming out here, my needle going in the same spot. But instead of bringing my needle out towards the top, I'm going to bring my needle out towards the bottom, and it's going to pick up some of the fabric of my backing and batting so that I have a stitch both through my binding and a stitch through my backing on the needle at the same time. So I'm creating two stitches at once, and that will help me work my way all the way around. Now when you get to the corner, I will fold over and create my 45-degree angle, and then I will pull that down so that I have a nice mitered edge. And again, if you have all of your pieces lined up, it should create a nice point where those two corners come together. I will bring my needle up through the end of this miter, and I will put a couple of stitches in it just so that that corner stays flat and nice and even. And then I will continue stitching my binding down. Now, if you are going to do this with a sewing machine, I'm just going to stick my needle in here so it doesn't flop all over the place. Then you will do the same thing. You're going to fold over your binding. And again, I don't always use the clips and do it ahead of time. A lot of times I will just take it to my sewing machine. but you will fold under your binding, and then you're going to run your needle of your sewing machine right next to the binding on the front side of your quilted project. And then it's going to catch the binding on the back side. And this is why I use a 2¼ inch wide binding when I'm doing machine binding, to make sure that I have plenty of fabric for it to catch on the back side. When I go to do my corners, when I am doing it on the sewing machine, so I am running clockwise around. So say I'm heading towards this corner here. Normally when I'm doing my normal binding, I'm going to keep this edge down, and then I'll fold the edge as I come to it under. But then what happens is sometimes my machine will push my binding up a little bit and out of the way, or not line it up the way I want it to. So to avoid that, I make sure that this second side, so I'm already sewing down this side, that I put my second side down first and then fold over the back. So let me show you again. The second side, so I'm sewing up this edge. I'm going to fold up this side first and then fold over this side. Again, I want to make sure that my corners are lined up so that it makes a nice corner down here. And then I'm going to finish my sewing. So again, I would do this all on the machine, leave my needle down and pivot, but because this one is underneath this one, I'm not going to push it out of the way, and it's going to catch right here and make that nice turn and keep going all the way around. You can see I have this corner stitch down right here, and I came at it this way, and it just made a nice good corner there. I like stitching down my binding to the back from the front so I can control the way it looks on the front. I'm a little less worried about what it looks like on the back. Like you can see here, I have a little extra fabric for some reason. I pulled it a little tighter there than I did here, and I don't mind that as much on the back. Now, if you want, you can reverse the sides. So you would, instead of sewing down your binding to the front of your quilt sandwich, you can sew it down to the back and then bring it up to the front and then do this stitching on this side. So you will have stitches in your binding on the front, but then at least it's controlled and nice and even. Or you can stitch it down from the back side so that the stitches catching the binding on this side look nice and even, but you have less control over what it looks like on the front. And I don't like that as well. So this is my preferred method. I sew the binding to the front, I bring it around to the back, and then I just make sure that my stitches on the front are running right next to my binding, and then on the back, sometimes they get a little off, but as long as it's catching that binding and holding it down all the way around, I'm a little less concerned about it. So those are some tips for stitching down your binding, whether you do it by hand or by machine. It helps you get this last finishing touch done on your binding, and then you'll have a fabulous quilted project that you will love for years. That's binding. If you have any questions, leave some comments below. Feel free to find me on Instagram at Amarooney Designs, or send me an email and I will be happy to help you. Happy stitching, friends. Have a great day.